Good morning. My name is Robin Wynn, and I am the Director of Communications for Destiny Adoption Foundation. And today we're here with Laurie Gabrielson. Laurie, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing great. Thank
Good.
you.
Thank you so much for doing this and for being willing to share your story. Why don't you start out with telling us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, I've been married 40 years to my husband, and we have 4 sons. We were able to have biologically our first son,
Okay.
and then the other 3 sons have been adopted.
Wow.
Each one is a different type of adoption. One was through an agency, one was through a private attorney, and one was just by word of mouth through a friend who knew we were trying to adopt.
Awesome.
Some of them closed, one of them open, so we have kind of a hodgepodge of experience.
Awesome. Why don't you tell us about your story that led you to adoption and the reasons or the choices or kind of the things that prompted you and your husband to adopt the 3 children that you've adopted?
Okay, great. I have always wanted to have a large family. I love children. I knew as a young girl I wanted to have a large family. So when we got married, I had difficulty having a child. It took several years, and we were able to have the one child. But then subsequently, I went through about 16 years of fertility treatments. We realized that we were losing precious time. We didn't want our one son to be an only child because there's such great lessons
Right.
to be learned and love to be shared
Yeah.
in those years. So we were living in Malaysia at the time, so that made it difficult to adopt. The Malaysian government was very hesitant to let a Caucasian family that would move back to the United States adopt a Malaysian child.
Okay.
So we had applied through an agency here in the U.S. and finally when the one son was 7 years old, we were able to adopt
Wow.
John.
Mm.
So that was a treat. And then we subsequently moved back to the United States, and we knew we wanted more children. And about 5 years later, we got Stephen, and 3 months later, we got David.
Oh wow! So you've got the 2 little ones that were really close together. And
Very close together.
were they all newborns when you
They
adopted them?
actually all happened to be newborns.
Okay.
We virtually followed every lead we could find to adopt children, and several fell through, and that was heartbreaking.
I can imagine.
But we have the family we were supposed to have.
Yeah. How was it raising with your 7-year-old that was biological and then the children that you adopted? How did that blend together? How did that work out?
It blended wonderfully because at 7 he was old enough to understand, and he had gone through the yearning process.
He wanted a sibling.
He
just
wanted
as
siblings, wasn't sold on the idea of a baby sister.
much. Right. So he got everything he
So
wanted.
yes, he hit the bonus. So it was really very wonderful. By the time we adopted the first child, he was already in school. And like I said, he was old enough to understand. He was old enough to really desire little brothers
Yes.
or little sisters. And it gave us one-on-one time
Yeah.
when we adopted John to really focus on him while Scott was in school. So it really, actually, the timing way too far apart,
But sometimes
but it still had blessings to it.
Yeah. And I was gonna follow up with what are the major blessings that stick out to you
Of
aside
adoption.
from having your beautiful boys?
Oh, okay, I'll just try not to get too teary. One of the great blessings that has come to me personally is understanding the strength and the honor and the dignity of a birth mother. I had one open adoption where the birth mother personally handed me her son. And that's probably the most significant event of my life. It changed my whole perspective on adoption, because not only did I want to raise these boys as they're all one big happy family, but I felt accountability because she had suffered so much and sacrificed so much that I wanted her to feel, as this young baby grew up, that she had made the right decision. So it really gave me that motivation to be a good mother. So to me, that was a great blessing, was to have experienced that interaction with the birth mother.
That's beautiful. Have you kept in contact with her?
Oh, very much so.
Was she always a part of your life, or just?
Yes.
Okay.
It was an open adoption in the sense that I stayed in contact with her every 6 months. I would send her pictures. I would tell her what David was doing. I talked to her on the phone regularly, but we had decided for his sake that we would wait until he was old enough, until he got through his teenage years, which can be very tumultuous, to introduce them. And that was definitely the right decision in that circumstance. He has since met her, met his 5 little brothers and his 2 little sisters, and they have a very sweet, wonderful relationship. What mother would not want their child to have as many sources of love?
Right.
I've been blessed that it hasn't threatened me to have 3 sets of birth parents at all. Not at all.
Did you raise them knowing that they were adopted, or did you wait until later to tell them as well?
Well, it's kind of a fun story. We never had to make it a point that they were adopted. They just knew growing up that they were adopted, because we had the one son who was a biological, and then John came 5 years later. John was there as a 5-year-old to witness the adoption of his 2 younger brothers. And it was just kind of cute when we explained to John, as we adopted these 2 little brothers, John said, well, tell me about Scott. How was Scott adopted? And we said, well, Scott was not adopted. And this 5-year-old just went, oh, what? Scott's not adopted? And the tears rolled down his face. He said, but we still love him. He's still part of our family. He was just so upset that Scott had not had the privilege of being adopted. He was just incredulous. So they knew they were adopted growing up, but we did have to break the news at one point to the 5-year-old that Scott was not, but we love him anyway. We'll pretend like he was.
And sometimes it's opposite.
Oh, yes.
They're like, what? We were adopted, but he wasn't.
And that would be a recommendation. Start explaining to them early, very early on. You can show pictures of, this is us when we picked you up, and we have a picture of John in a little Christmas stocking because it was Christmas time. So don't let it be a surprise. Yes, it's a natural thing, and they almost assume everyone's adopted. That's how you have children.
That's adorable. I love that story. So how did anything affect you and your husband's relationship through adoption, or?
Adoption, like having your own children, can be very stressful. We had a lot of adoptions that fell through after the baby was born, and that was devastating, but we've been blessed that our relationship has been strong enough to weather some of the disappointments and some of the challenges that adoption presents.
Looking back, what would you kind of say to other prospective parents that are looking to adopt or struggling with some of the same issues that you found yourself facing?
I would encourage them to start early. I, of course, after 2 years of not being able to have a second child, started looking into the adoption possibility. Everyone kept saying, oh, just relax, you'll get pregnant. Just relax, you're too uptight about it. And I thought, okay, well, the way I'm going to relax would probably be to adopt. because then
you knew.
I would have this baby that I wanted so badly. And so we started the process, but even then it took us 5 years. So even if potential adoptive parents, aren't sure whether they want to adopt, start the process, because you can always say, we're not ready.
Right.
We're not sure. But if you wait and vacillate for 5 years, it could be another 5 years. So start the process early. Be aware of attorneys. Sometimes those adoptions can be a little tricky.
Yeah.
We experienced some scams, and just be aware. An agency adoption is much cleaner and less fraught with problems.
Just kind of one-on-one versus all these other little
Layers of people.
Yes. And that usually keeps things more simple too.
It does.
How is the relationship between your boys now, all of them?
They're very close. Even though the years are far apart, they're very close, especially these last 2 that are only 3 months apart. Their personalities are total opposite, and they have grown up as the best of friends.
Wow.
It's been sweet. But I would also make the recommendation not to adopt so closely together. Everyone said, oh, how fun, you got twins. And looking back, with adopted children, they deserve one-on-one time with the new parents. You need to really focus in, because there can be detachment or attachment issues. There can be specific issues that are nature versus nurture.
Right.
And so you want to be sure that you have the time and the energy and the emotional grit
to give them everything.
To give them what they need. And having them 3 months apart was challenging, really challenging. It worked out.
Right.
But I would recommend at
Some
least,
space.
as you would probably space your own biological.
When you're planning that and timing that. What are some of the things when you think back that just warm your heart from the whole experience?
Just when I'm in the presence of my sons. I'm so sorry.
It is okay.
They are wonderful men. Having the opportunity to help them find their birth parents, and having that reunion and putting that piece of the puzzle back in place. We've always raised our boys that their birth mothers are the most honorable women in the world, because they have had to sacrifice what they love most. And so it's been wonderful for my sons to be able to go back to their birth mothers. I keep saying birth mothers. We're talking birth fathers here too.
Oh, awesome.
Both, but a special focus on the birth mother, and thank them for what they did. All 4 boys have grown up into exceptional men. Just wonderful men. And to see their relationship with each other, I cannot imagine their lives
without each other,
without their brothers.
Does it feel like it was all just supposed to fall into place the way it did?
Absolutely. Absolutely. They are ours and we are theirs forever.
Yes. And I feel that way too. I feel like adoption is, I've said this before, but part of Heavenly Father's plan, like for those eternal families, and He had it in place long before, I feel.
I totally feel that way. I know that I knew these boys. There is a bond there. And that started far before the time they were born. That really, the only difference is how they got here.
Yep, just a different.
But I also feel that their birth parents are also part of this plan.
Yeah, and they were aware also.
That
before.
they were willing to bring these spirits into the world so that I could have my family, and I'm so grateful.
Well, I can definitely see the love that you have for your babies all over your face.
Sorry.
Just your everything, your countenance and everything, and I think it's beautiful. Is there anything else that you wanted to add?
I would encourage people to adopt. Don't be afraid. And help your children to understand what a tremendous sacrifice that their birth parents have made to allow them to come to be adopted, and that it isn't a rejection. It is two sets of parents who love them more than
So
anything.
much.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
that's it.
Thank you so much, Sister Gabrielson. We will end now,
Okay.
and you have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.